This evening at about 8 p.m., our IMPD Southeast district officers were dispatched to the apartment complex just to my north on the report of a domestic. Some type of domestic incident occurred involving one of our off-duty IMPD officers and what we believe to be his estranged wife at the time. We don't know exactly what all happened. However, we know enough to have one of our supervisors that was on duty at the time request that our Special Investigations Unit come out to the scene. And a little background on our Special Investigations Unit, we call it our SIU unit. But SIU unit is responsible for investigating criminal allegations against IMPD officers and other public safety officials here in Indianapolis. That request was made. Our SIU detective SIU detective's investigation. The off-duty IMPD officer came back to the apartment and began shooting in the apartment. Our on-duty detective that was doing the investigation was struck in his arm. We don't know if he was struck a second time or whether that bullet passed through and went into his back. Our on-duty detective returned fire but did not strike the suspect. After the shooting, the suspect fled, and I'm changing my terminology here. Once the shooting occurred, the off-duty officer then became a suspect in an additional criminal act tonight. So I will continue to refer to him as a suspect to make things a little bit clearer. After the gun battle occurred inside the apartment, the suspect fled in a personally owned vehicle. Our on-duty detective then made notification that he had been shot. Through investigative techniques, we were able to track our suspect to Cincinnati, Ohio. With the help of Cincinnati Police Department, the suspect was taken into custody without incident. At this point in our investigation, our on-duty officer at the time, our on-duty detective, remains at Methodist Hospital. He's in good condition. Our suspect in this incident is in custody in Cincinnati, Ohio. Our detectives are on their way to Cincinnati to continue the investigation that occurred here in Indianapolis and then do all the additional follow-up work in Cincinnati. So we would like to publicly thank the Cincinnati Police Department for their help in apprehending this suspect safely. Our suspect will be facing criminal charges here in Indianapolis once our investigation completes. And I don't have those specific charges, obviously. We will work with the prosecutor's office to file charges and conduct that investigation. As far as his employment, administratively, he will be immediately suspended without pay. I'm making that differentiation because people always ask. He will be suspended without pay pending termination from the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. Obviously, this is a very critical incident, and I was very appreciative of our media for, one, getting the information out, but also giving us some time to do our investigation. And luckily, this incident resolved itself without any further violence or any further injuries to any other police officers tonight. So, just a quick update on what I know right now, and I'll be happy to take any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them based upon what I know right now.
When you say domestic violence situation, allegation, do we know what allegedly happened?
Well, that's what we were trying to figure out. Obviously, the victim in our domestic incident made an allegation that our on-duty officers, or responding on-duty officers, and our supervisor felt were serious enough of a criminal nature to call in our SIU detectives so they could begin their criminal investigations into the actions that took place inside the apartment earlier this evening.
Do we know, obviously there was a wife and we understand there were children.
Mhm.
Where were the children? Are they okay? Where are they now?
Yeah, obviously for their safety going forward, we don't disclose where they are now. However, the children are safe. The victim in the domestic case is safe.
Were the children there when
The children were there when this incident happened. I believe they were there for the first incident and the second incident involving.
the detective arrived?
That is correct.
Major, what can you tell us about the suspect, the officer?
Mm-hmm.
How long has he been with the department?
I believe he has been on about 18 years, assigned to Southwest District, and that's about all we're going to give out on that as far as employment history is concerned.
Any timeline for releasing of identities of the suspect, the off-duty officer, and
Mhm.
the detective in this case?
Yeah, obviously, this is a very unique incident. Obviously, this incident isn't playing out traditionally like we see. Our victim, police officer, detective, once he is treated and released, obviously we will make the determination internally whether or not to release his name. As far as our off-duty officer that is now the suspect in this criminal investigation, once he is brought back to Marion County and he is formally arrested, and I say formally arrested because he is out of state and we have to work with that extradition, we will release his name.
Was there some sort of standoff situation in Cincinnati prior to him being taken into custody?
I don't have the specific details of him being taken into custody in Cincinnati. That's something that you'll have to follow up with them. I do know that from the last contact that we know that he had in Indianapolis until the time he was taken into custody in Cincinnati, there was a time gap. So what happened in between there, whether or not there was a standoff with Cincinnati, I don't have that information right now.
Do you know, Cincy was telling us that they shut down a bridge and that there was a shootout, basically, at one point.
If that's the case, I don't have that information. I was told he was taken into custody without incident. But if that is in fact the case, I would suggest you follow up with them to verify that information because I cannot on my end.
Do we know if there was any sort of relationship, how well acquainted was the off-duty officer with the detective that was investigating this allegation? Had they had any prior relationship or run-in between the two of them that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, sorry. Not that I'm aware of. I mean, we're 1,600 officers on IMPD, and there are certainly officers that I don't know. And as far as their relationship or any past dealings with each other, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to answer that right now.
How long has the officer that was shot been with IMPD?
Probably over 18 years himself, closer to 20.
And you're saying the officer that's now a suspect is a veteran with 18 years?
That is correct.
How old were the kids that were inside?
I don't have that information.
How
We'll have
many?
to. Yeah, we'll probably have that in the release once we verify the ages.
No injuries in the domestic violence situation?
I can't say for sure definitively on the victim. Obviously, that was part of the investigation that was ongoing, and then the shooting occurred. So that kind of took the victim not out of the situation, but that was the whole point of the detective being there in the first place.
And the detective was there by himself at the time doing this, and that's typical in these kind of internal affairs investigations?
It wasn't an internal affair. It was criminal SIU investigations. And yes, there are times where our detectives will follow up with a victim by themselves based upon what they know at the time, what they knew at the time. So,
And the suspect, what district was he assigned to?
Southwest.
Can you describe generally, when we were out here, you all were saying this was a very serious situation. Just talk about the response that goes into a situation like this. Obviously, it was volatile. There was some internal things going on within the department. How do you all handle that as a general explanation?
I think the response you saw tonight is very similar to the response you would see anytime an officer is shot or we have an active armed individual on the loose. I mean, certainly it heightens our senses, the fact that an officer is involved, an officer with training and access to firearms, and clearly shot a fellow officer. So that concern is in the back of everyone's head, so it certainly raises your awareness and your situational awareness of the incident itself. However, to say that any extra measures were taken, I mean, we would do this same investigation if it wasn't a police officer, especially if we knew we had a suspect, armed suspect on the loose.
How many times did the detective hit? Once?
We know for sure once. We don't know if that bullet passed through his arm and then entered into his side, or if that was a separate shot into his side.
And when the suspect left in his personal vehicle, were you guys in communication with him as he's driving to Cincinnati? Did you have him on the phone trying to talk him down, hey, turn around, or anything like that?
Yeah, that's part of our investigation that we're not going to release quite yet. As we get further into this investigation and obviously further into the probable cause and our investigation with the prosecutor's office, that information can be released.
I know you all said no identities yet, but the now suspect, do we know whether he has had issues in his time with Metro Police that you all can comment on?
I mean, a lot of what you're asking me to comment on are employment decisions that we traditionally don't release. However, there are some things that may be in the public domain that are out there and readily available for anybody in the public to follow up on and get that information.
How much time passed between when the officer was shot and then other responding officers arrived?
Well, about 8 o'clock, our officers were here in the first place, and the shooting of the detective was a little after 9, I believe, or closer to 10. So officers were in the area. They weren't specifically at the apartment itself, but they were in the area, so our officers were here within minutes. And sometimes that communication between the officer notifying communications that they have been shot and that information getting out to all the responding officers allows suspects and other individuals to leave the scene.
How'd you guys know to call Cincy Police? How did you know he was maybe headed there?
Like I said, we had several investigative techniques that we utilized to make that determination.
Are you guys approaching this a little bit differently because the suspect had police training?
Yeah, I mean, anytime that we have a known suspect and we have information on background training, accessibility to firearms, regardless if they're a police officer, it heightens your awareness. Like I said earlier, because this did involve an off-duty officer with access to weapons and obviously has a background and training in firearms, obviously that heightens our senses and heightens our awareness and takes that to a different level of obviously our response to not only protect ourselves but to protect him.
But you don't have any first-hand knowledge of a bridge or anything being shut down in Cincinnati to help get this suspect?
That's something you'd have to follow up with them. I'm sorry.
Major, did the suspect use his service weapon, do you know, to shoot this detective?
I don't know that for sure, but what I do know is his police vehicle. We do have his police vehicle in our custody. His police radio was in the police vehicle. His duty belt was in the police vehicle, and there was a weapon in his holster on his duty belt. We will then follow up and get into that car to determine what gun is in that holster, what gun is assigned to him by the department, and to make sure that gun, our property, his issued firearm, wasn't used in this. So that's all part of this ongoing investigation. So, we'll probably be investigating this for the next 24 to 48 hours to wrap up all those loose ends.
How long will it take to process that apartment as a crime scene? Obviously, I guess twofold question: how long to process that, and two, do we know how many shots were fired in that area? Was this, a lot of bullets exchanged back and forth?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't have that information right now. As far as processing that crime scene, it all depends exactly what you just asked: how many shots were fired, how large of an area that the gun battle occurred in. I believe it occurred all inside, from what I understand. So that shouldn't take too much longer to process. And obviously there will be a scene to process in Cincinnati, and then we will also be processing our police vehicle just to do an inventory to make sure that none of our equipment is missing and none of our equipment was used in this incident tonight. Did we forget anything? Leave anything out? Any other questions? All right. You're very welcome. Kendall will be issuing this release at some point. It'll hit before your 5 o'clock or your 6 o'clock, whatever comes on.